Welcome to the Misery Man, where every story drags you deeper into the dark, and every shadow hides a truth you were never meant to see. In a quiet village surrounded by an endless green wilderness, people never joked about the forest to the north. It wasn't superstition, it wasn't folklore, it was memory. The elders warned anyone who would listen, the forest remembers everything, and it never forgets who enters. No one went near the old path anymore. Not after what happened all those years ago. But one man didn't believe in warnings. His name was Daniel Morris, a 32-year-old photographer who traveled the world searching for forgotten places and abandoned landscapes. He wasn't afraid of danger. In fact, danger made his photos go viral. So when he heard rumors about a vanishing path and an ancient forest that whispers back, he decided it would be his next project. He arrived at the village late one evening. The innkeeper, an elderly woman, stared at him with tired, gray eyes as he checked in. She didn't ask about his luggage, his work, or why he was there. She only asked one thing: "Are you going into the forest?" Daniel just laughed and nodded. The woman didn't smile back, she simply whispered, "Don't let it remember you." That night, Daniel studied his map, marked the Forbiddens Trail, and prepared his camera. Outside, the wind moved strangely, as if it were circling the inn instead of just passing by. At sunrise, Daniel entered the forest. The air was colder than it should have been. Still, heavy, watching. The trees stood unnaturally straight, all leaning slightly inward, forming a dark tunnel. As Daniel walked, the path behind him seemed to fade, not disappear, but blur like old paint being washed away by rain. He brushed it off, thinking it was just morning fog. 30 minutes later, something strange happened. He found footprints, but they weren't animal tracks. They were human, bare feet, small, delicate, almost like a child's. And they looked fresh. Daniel called out, "Hello! Is anyone here?" Silence. Then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, a soft giggle, but it didn't sound playful. It sounded hungry. He decided to follow the prints. The footprints led him to a clearing, and in the center stood a massive tree, ancient, twisted with bark blackened like charred wood. Leaning against it was a young woman in a pale dress. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared at Daniel with strange, glassy eyes. "Are you lost?" he asked, lowering his camera. Her lips parted slowly. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice barely a breath of air. "This place remembers everything. Who are you?" Daniel asked, taking a step closer. She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes drifted to something just behind Daniel. He turned around. A figure stood between the trees, just tall enough to be human, but to silent. When Daniel blinked, it was gone. He felt a cold chill climb his spine when he turned back to the woman. She was gone too. No footsteps, no movement. Just leaves settling on the ground where she had stood moments before. Daniel tried to return to the path, but the trees weren't the same. What had been a clear trail now twisted in a dozen different directions. Branches seemed to move as though the forest itself was shifting around him. He pulled out his compass. The needle spun wildly, never settling. He tried his phone's GPS. No signal. He kept walking, choosing a direction at random. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours felt like days. He started hearing whispers, not words, but the sound of voices overlapping, echoing from inside the trees. Then he found something that froze his blood. A backpack, old, torn, covered in dirt. Inside, he found a notebook. The first page had a frantic message scrawled on it. "If you find this, leave. The forest remembers you now." Flipping through the next pages, Daniel realized it belonged to a hiker who had gone missing years ago. Someone who had vanished without a trace. Someone who had walked this exact same path and never returned. The sun fell unnaturally fast, like it was being pulled out of the sky. Daniel was forced to find shelter beneath an old rock formation. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. At midnight, the forest changed. The whispering became distinct voices. The giggle he'd heard earlier came closer. Footsteps circled his hiding spot. Slowly, deliberately. Then a Daniel. The voice was right behind him. A woman's voice, soft, broken. He spun around. It was the woman from the clearing. But her face was wrong twisted, stretched, as if someone had taken a normal face and carved a smile that was far too wide. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "You don't leave once it remembers you." Her hand reached toward his face. Her fingers were long, too long. Daniel ran. Branches ripped at his clothes like claws. Roots on the forest floor grabbed at his ankles, trying to trip him. The trees themselves leaned in, closing around him like the ribs of some giant, breathing beast. The voices grew louder, a chorus of despair. "Stay. Don't leave us. You're part of us now." He ran until his lungs burned, and then he saw it. A wooden signpost, old, rotting, barely standing. It read, "Village 1 mile." He sprinted. As he neared the edge of the woods, the whispers turned into screams. The trees shook violently. Shadows crawled across the ground, trying to block his way. Then came the last voice, a deep, ancient voice that felt like it came from the very roots of the world. "You will return." They always return. Daniel stumbled out of the forest and collapsed onto the open road. The whine stopped. The whispers faded. The village lights glowed in the distance. He was safe, for now. But the next morning, when he looked at his camera, all his photos were gone. Every forest picture had been completely replaced with a single, chilling image. A picture of him, taken from behind, standing inside the forest, in front of the ancient black tree. At the bottom of the photo, scribbled in what looked like dirt-like lines, were for words. "The forest remembers you." Daniel left the village immediately, but sometimes, late at night, he swears he can still hear the forest whispering through his window, calling him back. You've survived this story, for now. If you want more nightmares, like the video, subscribe, and step back into the darkness with me, here on The Misery Man.